Now, I want to go into this letting it be known that this is not your average Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur review. There's not going to be a lot of praising as with other episodes that have come prior. However, I want it to be known that my love for Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur runs deep. And yet, this episode, it was not my cup of tea. It was not hitting. Now let me begin. Casey here is Lunella's bestie. They're besties. Everything's cool usually between them, but this episode wanted to show them having a tiff. Similar to last season, they had a tiff on Casey's birthday, but it wasn't really deep and it was resolved by the end of the episode, and I guess they wanted to recreate that, but they didn't do it properly or in an exciting way as they did that last time. So Casey is aware of trauma. She's aware of Lunella's trauma, and technically it is Lunella's lab. It was like, why was Casey there and wanted to be loud as well, or wanted to be a disturbance or a hindrance rather than a help? Lunella literally told her how important it was to focus on the task at hand, and Casey dismissed her. She kept playing a song Lunella didn't want to hear. After a while, she still wouldn't turn it off. Lunella needed quiet and focus since Casey wasn't helping, nor did she offer to assist with Lunella's creation. Casey didn't ever stop and say, hey Lunella, well, how can I help you? She contradicted herself. She was saying how she wanted to help Lunella, but she wanted to help Lunella in her own way and didn't care the actual type of help Lunella needed, nor did she inquire about it. It didn't seem like typical Casey. The Casey in this episode wanted to be petty for some reason. And it's like, what was going on with this episode? Why so petty? Casey and Lunella always get along, and I guess the writers wanted them to have an episode where they disagreed, but still, if your friend just went through something traumatizing, went who knows where, and asked you for a simple thing as being quieter, I don't know why you would fight against that. To be frank, Casey did not save Lunella nor help her through her trauma, nor has Lunella placed that responsibility on Casey. But Casey could at least turn off some music in Lunella's lab. Just saying. Then there's Casey reorganizing Lunella's lab in a way Casey likes but not Lunella. How does this help with Lunella's mental health? Now, they are depicting young ages, but the fact Casey got so tender at Lunella's honesty and disliking how she arranged the lab was hilarious as much as it was silly. I understood Lunella acting a fool and flipping things over because, as we established the last 2 episodes of this season so far, she's been through some psychological and physical tribulations. What is Casey flipping stuff over for? Stumping stuff out. Some don't think straight when they're mad. This is true, but Casey, I just didn't like how this episode was trying to pose Casey as insensitive, a bit immature, and tone deaf to Lunella's mental state. Casey seemed to start the trajectory of the discourse, inciting a fight with Lunella. Devil got caught in the crossfire of the fight. Devil suffered. I mean, he was going through because of Lunella and Casey's tiff, with Casey believing it was mostly Lunella's fault, when Casey seemed to inadvertently trigger Lunella into fighting with her after Lunella tried to be honest with Casey. Lunella even said Casey was right in the very beginning of their journey, in the very beginning of them about to go into Devil, and Casey was too ready for a fight. She was about to argue with her and then was like, oh yeah, she actually is saying I'm right. Okay. A whole different person from who we knew in previous episodes. It's like they wanted to start something or create friction between the two. When I say them, I do mean the powers that be over the episode. I did see one person wrote it while another directed it, but still, it has to be approved by a whole bunch of people to air and be completed. I'm surprised they just reviewed the episode and thought, yes, we wanted to go in this direction. This wasn't the only thing I had beef with. The plot hole they had with them zooming in the Chippy mobile and needed to have the roof down to go inside Devil's stomach, but then had to go off to view and touch stuff, in addition to shooting at bad bacteria in Devil's stomach. How? It might be petty to point this out since this is a world with a living, breathing dinosaur from another dimension, but if it's a show that includes science, I need them to give a scientific explanation or reasoning, regardless if it's fiction or not. Just as we get a reason with time-traveling films, we the audience are given reasons to accept the impossible, to maintain us in the willing suspension of disbelief. Another plot hole that again is probably so small and unnecessary to mention, but I'm gonna highlight it. Beyonder swoops in for a second too. Why? And why didn't she ask him to snap the goo machine out of Devil if he popped up to explain something? Moving on, I loved when Casey, who offered to come with Lunella under the pretense of caring about Lunella's safety, turned around to argue with her and try to use Lunella's early words against her. It was hilarious, since Casey had the capability of going with Lunella due to one of Lunella's inventions that she sipped on, so the fact that she tried to pull any her space, her rules card was a joke. I would have done the same thing as Lunella and jetted out of the mobile. Notice that Lunella left the mobile with a helmet, despite earlier not needing one to poke stuff. Circling back though, getting back to Lunella stepping, because it was a mood. Lunella turned out to be right in where the goo grenade was, which was a trip. I can't emphasize enough how out of pocket Casey was acting in this episode. Casey had always been the friend with an encouraging word and support in her own way. The small things have a big impact. For a lack of a better term, Casey has been that cheerleader. To show her being so negative and petty in this episode was displeasing, regardless of how funny some of their spats were. The fact that Lunella was in danger sent a signal for help, and then Casey came just to make some speech instead of getting her bestie out of dodge and danger from being stuck as she was with the molecular man will forever be insane to me. A trip. Another plot hole I will gladly mention, with Lunella having some claw device that removed parasite remains from off her person but couldn't be used to cut her loose. What was this episode? Yes, Casey came through by responding to the distress signal. However, this is meeting the basics of human decency, not only by saving a fellow human being, but saving an above decent person who you have called your friend in the past. Literally earlier that day, actually. Then Casey knows when the detonator was set off, but wastes time of the 60 seconds to give Lunella a mini lecture about allowing Casey to help her. When actuality, Casey is asking to help her in the way she wants rather in a way Lunella wants. If that was a moral or lesson of the story, then it's flopped, and it flopped hard. This was such an ignorant episode. I love the show regardless. I don't want this to be a full-on negative review, so I will emphasize the facial expressions in here were lovely. The art and animation is always flawless to me, and regardless of writing for this specific episode, you can tell how much dedication and affection is placed into this show. I beef about certain things. I always find something that could have been better and stuff. Nevertheless, mad respect for the voice actors in this episode, including these two, who voiced the most in this episode. I could tell certain inflections and voice adjustments were made for their fights, and especially while Lunella was traveling alone and narrating the inners of Devil and breaking down the type of stuff we, the audience, were seeing. It was purposeful, her sounding like a tour guide while her voice sounded like she was speaking in a mic. Love that small yet noticeable detail. Yes, this episode is quite unserious. The end included Lunella admitting she was acting as a, quote, controllable jerk, but she went through something traumatizing, life or death traumatizing, and didn't do anything wrong in the beginning of this episode. She could have apologized for causing the goo detonator to detonate, but it would have never gotten to Devil's stomach without Casey inciting a fight. Again, after Lunella kept it 100 and honest. It ended with both doing their own apologies, but no, it's a no. Why show Lunella's trauma but not acknowledge it once in this entire episode, and even insinuate Lunella is wrong for wanting to be in control after going through an out of control experience where she felt powerless? It's natural she wants to feel some semblance of power over herself and surrounding. This episode could have ended on Casey acknowledging that, understanding that, but it ended with Lunella being portrayed as needing to learn and grow. What was the point of writing her trauma? Why wasn't she triggered as she had been the last episode? If it's the kind of trauma that can take a break like that when Lunella was exposed to a parallel situation as being restrained and down in this episode as in episode 1, then what was the point? No disrespect or shade, just giving an honest opinion. I will say once more, the show is a gem and I will always say it is, but this is not one of the great ones. I'll leave it at that. That's all for this video. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned.